Welcome to the Daily Insider here on VegasInsider.com. Kevin Rogers with you. Friday, March 5th, 2021. That's right, March Madness is here. Conference tournaments are underway. And then we'll get to the big boys coming up next week. And as you see in the middle of the screen, that is our own Tom Cunningham, our bracketologist, among other things. He's our version of Joe Lenardi without the bad hair. So we welcome Tom in, and Tom's been updating these brackets every single day. And Tom, let's get right to it. And let's begin. In the Midwest, you have Gonzaga still as your one seed in that. And Gonzaga will play in the WCC tournament coming up this weekend. But I know that you have Villanova in there as well. What change did you make with Villanova with Colin Gillespie now out for the season with the knee injury?
Yeah, well, I'm not the only one. Odds makers have actually went ahead and moved Creighton to the new favorite for the Big East Conference tournament ahead of Villanova. I went ahead and moved them from 2 to 3, but this has a little bit to do with Colin Gillespie, along with the fact that Villanova, they've been losing games on the road pretty frequently this season. And they lost a really, really ugly road game before being able to beat Creighton at home. And that's the game where Colin Gillespie went down. So honestly, it's a mixture of both Gillespie going down and the fact that Villanova struggles on the road.
What about Oklahoma State? You have them as the 4 in that region, and we talked about how crazy it is. Like, they're supposed to be in, but the NCAA, are they going to allow them in? All this other stuff. But Oklahoma State picked up the 2 big wins over Oklahoma. They lost a close game. Well, they lost by 11, but they were hanging in with Baylor. And what are your thoughts on Oklahoma State as far as movement with them?
Yeah, they looked good in the loss, which I know, looking good in the loss shouldn't really matter to loss, but they did look good. Oklahoma State, they're kind of in a battle with Texas right now in terms of that 4-5 seed position. And I think Texas got a big win on the road against Oklahoma, so that'll help them entering the weekend. But Oklahoma State, as you alluded to, are they in? Are they not in? For those that don't know, they're in an appeals battle with the NCAA for eligibility to be in the postseason. And throughout the entire season, everyone thought the NCAA would rule Oklahoma State ineligible. Well, it's now March, and we haven't heard anything from the NCAA. So the belief is Oklahoma State is going to be in the tournament this year. That's why I can safely put them in as a 4 seed as of right now.
Now let's look at the West Regional, as you see on the screen. Baylor, the number 1 seed right now, and going through some of the other top seeds. Houston, who has been the top team in the American this season. Also West Virginia, in spite of the loss to Baylor. So you have Baylor and West Virginia in the same regional?
Yeah, and they're not the only 2 teams from the same conferences with high seeds that I have in the same region right now. We'll get to Michigan and Ohio State in a minute. But West Virginia, if you recall, I mean, they've looked very good this season, and their games against Baylor have been, decent. So I don't think there's much separation between the 2. But obviously Baylor, they've 1 loss, 19 wins, I think it is this season. And so they obviously are going to be the number 1 seed. Don't be surprised if West Virginia sneaks up to the number 2 seed, as we still have about a week's worth of games, depending how far teams advance in their respective conference tournament.
Now, we know Virginia is the defending national champion, quote unquote, because there was no champion last year. But you have Virginia as the 4 seed, and they really haven't been sharp down the stretch. They got blown out of Florida State. They lost to Duke. They lost to NC State, who's played well towards the end. And they beat Miami but didn't cover. How much faith do you have in Virginia? I see you have them going all the way to the Sweet 16. How much faith do you have in them, considering they've had some woes of late?
Well, little to none because of the woes you're talking about. We also don't really know the true matchups yet until the brackets are revealed. But Virginia's offense is deceivingly good this season. Normally with the Tony Bennett squad, you think defense first, offense second. And they don't give up a ton of points, but their defensive efficiency is actually pretty bad. It ranks below the top 100 in the nation. And their offensive efficiency is within the top 25 of the nation. So they're kind of a tricky team to nail down. And with that said, I have no conviction in them going far in this tournament for the fact that their offense and defense, they're all over the map, and they're very difficult to get a read out of. And then, of course, as you just mentioned and alluded to, the the woes they've had as of lately. They had an ugly loss to NC State, and so it's going to be interesting to see what Virginia can do in the tournament. But because of their unpredictability on both sides of the court right now, I would tend to lean away from them, almost fade them at this point.
Let's look at the East now, Tom. And you have Illinois as the 1 seed there, Alabama the 2, and Illinois off that huge win over Michigan. And they get Wisconsin coming up this weekend. Did Illinois beating Michigan, in your eyes, give them a number 1 seed?
Yeah, and they did it without their best player on the court. And they did it by beating them by 23 points, which, don't quote me on this, but I believe was the largest margin of victory for any team going up against the number 2 or 3 team in the nation at the time. So it was just a record-breaking game for Illinois in a couple different ways. They've definitely earned this 1 seed. I'm not sure if Alabama can do enough to get to the 1 seed. I think Ohio State and Iowa actually have a better chance due to the fact that they are in the Big Ten tournament. So if Ohio State and or Iowa look head and heels better than Illinois between today and when the Big Ten tournament actually ends, they might sneak in. But I do believe Illinois, with a 23-point victory over Michigan on the road without their best player, really, really did wonders in the eyes of the committee.
Seeing the other teams in this region, you have a couple SEC teams, Alabama and Arkansas, who you can argue are the 2 best SEC teams so far. You have Alabama going all the way to the Elite 8. What are your thoughts on both of those teams? Alabama and Arkansas split a pair of meetings this season. Most recently, Arkansas beat them. Alabama's played well, but Arkansas is the hotter team right now.
Right. Well, one thing that is the common denominator between both of these teams is they score a lot of points. They're not afraid to shoot the 3 ball at will. I mean, anyone who follows college basketball knows what Nate Oates did with the Buffalo Bulls. He's basically just brought that same, copy and pasted it with the Crimson Tide now. So it's not really a surprise to see Alabama shoot some of the most 3-pointers in a game in the nation this season. And Arkansas, I believe, is top 10, top 15 in terms of points scored per game. So for any team that has to face Alabama or Arkansas in the tournament, you have to score points with these clubs or they'll run away with the game pretty quickly.
One other matchup, again, this is not set in stone, but as far as just for our purposes talking about it, Oklahoma and Wichita State in the 6-11, which would be a fantastic game. Oklahoma's going backwards right now. They lost to Kansas State. They lost a pair to Oklahoma State and most recently lost to Texas. Wichita State's playing very well right now. They beat Houston along the way. Those are 2 teams going in different directions at the moment. Yeah,
I think Wichita State, the game where they were beaten by Memphis, where their star scorer Edetine, he basically had 4 points. He averages almost 20 a game, I believe. Once that happened for Wichita State, it's like a light turned on with the Shockers, and they have just taken off since then. So they are a very dangerous team. I still have some conviction issues with them, mainly because of the conference they play in. The opponents, they're just not on the same level as some of the other conferences this season. So Wichita, I'm a little hesitant about in terms of being an upset over Oklahoma right now. But I will say Oklahoma is starting to worry me, not necessarily because they're not good enough. They are good enough, but they're having issues closing games out. And that is a huge red flag for March Madness, which is essentially the most randomized one-and-done tournament in all of sports. So Oklahoma, I'm not ready to write them off yet, but the fact that they cannot close games out definitely worries me. And Wichita, just the strength of schedule, I still need to see a little bit more from them before I'm convinced they can advance in the tournament.
And now in the South region, Tom, you have Michigan as your 1, so you have Michigan and Illinois both as 1s. In spite of Michigan's loss to Illinois, but Michigan bounced back with the blowout of Michigan State. And you do have this pretty loaded here. First one I want to talk about with you is Purdue. That you have them going all the way to the Sweet 16. And that's a team that I feel like was up and down this season. They had a big win over Penn State last Friday night. What do you see in Purdue as a team that can maybe win a couple games in this tournament?
I really like Purdue a lot. They have one of the better big men in the nation. No one really talks about as being one of the best players in the nation. That's Trevion Williams. He's a dominant force. He can go toe-to-toe with anybody in the paint. So Purdue automatically entering most of the games that they find themselves in can at minimum match any post presence that they might feel threatened by. A good example is Kofi Cockburn from Illinois. Purdue feels like they can neutralize Coburn with Trevion Williams. Then you've got guys like Jaden Ivey and Brand Newman, who are freshmen, and they have stepped up as the season has progressed. And so I have a ton of conviction in Purdue. There was one game in particular, I forget which one it was, but Trevion Williams grabbed Jaden Ivey in the middle of a game, in the middle of them playing, and just chewed him out. I guess for lack of effort. It was a few weeks ago, so I forget. But since then, Jaden Ivey has been playing on a whole nother level. And so I love the chemistry, the identity, and the swagger Purdue has, and no one's talking about them. And no one's going to be picking them to go very far. So they actually are an intriguing pick for office pool brackets.
I notice here in this particular regional that you have 5 Big Ten teams winning a game at least. Michigan, Purdue, Wisconsin, Maryland, Ohio State. So you got a lot of faith in the Big Ten to get a representative or a few for at least the round of 32.
I guess. I mean, Michigan's playing a 16 seed, so I mean,
Norfolk State, I don't think it's pulling off that upset.
No, not this year. Hopefully not. I did pick against them. I did pick Missouri the year they beat Missouri in the tournament, of course. But I just think that the Big Ten is one you might want to fade in terms of picking a champion. In terms of the Big Ten winning round 1 or round 2 games, that's whatever at this point. If you are talking about Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, and championship, historically the Big Ten does not do well in winning this tournament. They usually have teams go far, but in terms of being crowned national champions, the Big Ten does not historically do well in this tournament. So I don't think I would put too much emphasis on Big Ten teams getting past the first 2 rounds if you're worried or if you are liking what the Big Ten has to offer this year. You got to think in terms of the future and the Final Four, the futures market, the Final Four, Sweet 16, those sort of bets with the Big Ten. And so when you have teams like Michigan, Ohio State, Purdue, Iowa, these are teams that, I won't say don't pick them to win it all. Just be cautious. You can have them going far, but I would be cautious in terms of crowning them your champion because I don't have the record books in front of me, but I think Maryland, they may have been in the they were in the ACC when they won the national title. I think they're the most recent Big Ten team to win a national championship in March Madness. So again, in terms of the Big Ten winning the whole tournament, be cautious about it, be weary, fade it if you need to. But in terms of the Big Ten winning games 1, 2, they should be fine in that regard.
And the irony is Maryland beat Indiana in the championship of Big Ten team that year, Jared Jeffries' team in Atlanta. One other thing I want to talk about with this past region, with the South Regional, we haven't really hit on the Pac-12, and you had USC and Colorado in there. Colorado's played well of late, coming off 3 straight wins at home. They beat UCLA and USC among those teams. USC also is the team that you mentioned. What do you think about what they can do? And USC is a team that's played well this season, and they get UCLA this weekend. What do you think they can do?
Well, I think the Pac-12 will have 4 teams in, and no more or no less. That's Oregon, UCLA, Colorado, and USC. Of those 4, the conviction for me lies with Oregon. You got Chris Duarte, Will Richardson, Eugene Omeroy. I mean, they are deep. They are a very, very deep team. My issue with Colorado is they lack consistency, and you saw it against Arizona State last night. That was a game that I believe they were favored by double digits. I think they barely escaped that by maybe 6 points or so. I forget. It was close in the first half. They were trailing for most of the first half. The thing with Colorado is they are just too inconsistent. They almost play to such a slow pace that it works against them, and they end up not scoring enough points because they are a defensive-minded first team. And so I like Oregon. I just think they have the depth, the star power, the scoring ability, and I have a little bit of lack of conviction in terms of consistency with everyone else in the Pac-12, which is USC, UCLA, and Colorado. They just have not been consistent enough for me this year.
Let's take a look, Tom, at tomorrow's action inside of college basketball. We really don't have lines yet on these games, but just your thoughts on some of these matchups. We had talked about Illinois and Ohio. I think I said Illinois playing Wisconsin. That was my mistake. Illinois is playing Ohio State tomorrow. I guess first on that game, Illinois going for their 20th win of the season. Your thoughts on that matchup in Columbus, Illinois, and Ohio State? Last time they played in Champaign, Ohio State came out with an 87-81 win back in mid-January.
Yeah, I don't know what Illinois team is coming out. Don't really know what the status of DeSunmu is. I know he broke his nose, so if I'm Illinois, I'm not playing him until the Big Ten tournament. I might not even play him until March Madness because Illinois doesn't need wins in the Big Ten tournament. So I would definitely keep an eye on the lineup going into the game. Ohio State at home is playing desperate. Illinois is coming off of a high against, destroying Michigan. And so I would be weary about taking Illinois. I know it's easy to take them, especially if they're given underdog odds based off what they just did in Ann Arbor. But Ohio State at home, they are they're 18-7. They're fighting for a 1 and a 2 seed in the tournament, but they're not content with the way they have been playing lately. So expect Ohio State to come out in this game and give it everything they have, just so they can give themselves some self-conviction. Like, we haven't lost it. We're still a good team. We're still good enough to be number one in the tournament. So let's go out there and let's show Illinois exactly what we can do.
And Ohio State, last 2 games at home, they've lost to Iowa and
Exactly.
Michigan. So,
Right.
Yeah, they want to finish off on a good note. This game is interesting, too, in the SEC, the Battle of Tigers, LSU and Missouri. Missouri's been so up and down, it feels like. They went at Florida a few nights ago. They got some really good road wins, but also they have some really questionable losses, losing to Auburn, losing a pair to Ole Miss, who is a bubble team, but also beating Illinois and Oregon in non-conference. What do you think about Missouri? They get LSU first time they're hooking up this season.
It's kind of the same story, different chapter with Missouri and 2 handful of teams in the nation, which is they have baffling losses and then they have unbelievably good wins, and you have no idea where to put them. Missouri, I like Missouri. They're much like some of the other teams we've discussed already. They have a lack of consistency, which you brought up already. However, going up against LSU, I mean, I couldn't even tell you who LSU's top quality win is this year. They haven't really beaten anybody substantial this year, and they're on the road. What I find interesting in this is that you have from a betting perspective, you have 2 teams that go over more times than not on the point total. But when you look at Missouri's games this year, they have games where, both teams will score 50 or 60 points. And you think to yourself, how can Missouri be 12-7-1 on the OU? It's just kind of head scratching, but they are. And so if you're looking at this game from a betting perspective, I would look at the point total possibly going over because, as you've mentioned, Missouri has been inconsistent this season. But LSU, they haven't really proven to me that they're a really, really good team. So I think that the point total will be the way to go in terms of betting that game on tomorrow.
And also, you talk about, Tom, some of LSU's wins. They beat Arkansas, but that was before Arkansas got hot.
Yeah, so, and I would argue at the time, Arkansas was still searching for their first quality win of the season as well. Arkansas has maybe 3 quality wins this year. One's against Alabama, Florida, and I think Missouri may be the other one. So, you can use that as saying, well, LSU has a win over Arkansas, and you would be right in that regard. But after that, it's slim pickings.
Yeah, and LSU, some of the wins since Arkansas, South Carolina, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Auburn, exactly. Vandy. They did beat Tennessee at home, which is probably the best win. And Tennessee, we know, has not played as well since a good start. So LSU definitely does not have a lot of great wins on the resume. Meanwhile, you have USC and UCLA. That's another one to keep an eye on tomorrow. USC blasted UCLA last time these teams played, Tom, 66-48 back on February 6th. And UCLA has not played. What am I looking at right now? I'm looking at the wrong one. I'm looking at USC. Sorry about that. So USC has dropped 3 of their past 5 games. They just beat Stanford, but before that, they lost at Colorado and at Utah. So obviously USC wants to get on track with a really good win to close things out. Yeah,
it's not easy though. UCLA is a whole nother animal in Pauley Pavilion. They're one of the most difficult teams to beat in their home venue. Mick Cronin, what he's done with that program in the 2 years that he's been there, I mean, it's a complete 1080. Now I know 17-7 in the Pac-12, and UCLA, you look at that and you say, is that really a 1080 from where UCLA was a few years ago? It absolutely is. And the poise of this team, they've grown up so quickly under Mick Cronin. You get Tiger Campbell. I mean, just seeing his game change, and some of these other players too that were there before Mick Cronin. It's very, very visible. And so USC, yeah, they want to go in and win. It's not easy, though. UCLA is a solid team at home. They're coached very well. They're very, very deep. They've got playmakers all over the place, from Jules Bernard to Yami Jacquez. Johnny Juzang is now coming in his own. So they've had a lot of injuries they've had to deal with. They've lost Jalen Hill. They've lost Chris Smith, who's a senior. He's a leading scorer for them. But UCLA is still very much a dangerous team. And what Mick Cronin's been able to do with all the injuries and, inheriting what was a dumpster fire of a program a few years ago, this is going to be a battle on Saturday, and it's going to be fantastic to watch. Both teams don't really need to worry in terms of making the tournament, but UCLA does need this win more than USC does. So look for the Bruins at home to come out strong in that one.
And UCLA has not lost a home game yet this season, so
yeah, they're really good inside.
Yeah,
there.
So we have that one there. Now, Duke and North Carolina always has to be mentioned because it's Duke, North Carolina. Yeah. And Duke is off this loss to Georgia Tech in overtime a few nights ago. And the Blue Devils now have lost 2 straight. They were playing well. They won 4 in a row. Where do you see them as far as a tournament team? Are they not a tournament team? Do they need to beat North Carolina to get in? They already lost to UNC at home, so they don't want to get swept by the Tar Heels. UNC is in, but what about Duke now and the importance of this game just to save their season?
Well, if Duke loses, they're done, unless they win the ACC tournament. I would even argue if they win this game, that's not a lock. And the reason I say that is because Syracuse has now, of course, as typical with Syracuse, you don't think they deserve to be in or they're going to get in, then the month of March hits, suddenly they're 15-8 and they're in the bubble. Syracuse had a huge win against Clemson at home. That put them in the bubble, and I would almost make a case that Syracuse now is in the driver's seat in terms of bubble teams from that conference, and it's not Duke anymore. Duke cannot lose. It doesn't matter if it's round 1, 2 of the ACC tournament, if it's this game against UNC. If Duke loses, they're done. That's it. They have to win this game. They probably have to win 3 games in the ACC tournament just to get in without winning the ACC tournament itself. It's going to be tough, but Syracuse did not make life easier for the Blue Devils when they beat Clemson at home this past week. So it'll be tough for the Blue Devils. Don't have them in, though. I don't think they're a tournament team personally. They looked good for a few games there, but again, the competition wasn't exactly great. I think Virginia was their best win, and we've kind of talked about how sluggish they've looked. They dropped a game to NC State in that same week. So, Duke, I'm sorry. I know there's a lot of Dukies out there, Blue Devil fans, but I just don't think this is the year for you guys. Sorry.
What about this one, Tom, from the Big East? Seton Hall, they take on St. John's, and St. John's got off to a bit of a slow start, but they played well down the stretch.
Yeah.
That's not good for Seton Hall here,
No.
losing to Georgetown, Butler, and UConn the last 3, and scoring 52 against Butler, 58 against UConn. Now you get St. John's, who you beat at home earlier in the season, back in December, which seems like, a million years ago now for the Pirates, who had a nice little run at the beginning of February. But, in that mix, they beat DePaul, who's the worst team in the Big East. Yeah. They beat Marquette, who's, very up and down. They had a good run at UConn, and they beat Providence on the road. But since then, 3 straight losses. Where's Seton Hall at right now?
They're out right now. Honestly, they're probably a 1 or a 2 in the NIT right now. They just have too many losses. And I feel bad for Kevin Willard because he always schedules the toughest schedule. So Seton Hall is ready to, for this time of the year. I think he may have bitten off a little more than he could chew. I think the tough scheduling for Seton Hall has come back to bite them. I think they're tired. I think they're lacking stamina right now. St. John's at home, they score points. They're a tough team to beat. They beat Villanova earlier this year. They're coached very well, too. A lot of people forget this is the same coach from Arkansas who's now at St. John's. And what he's doing there, they're 15-10 quietly on the bubble right now because they do have a lot of good quality wins. He's building a program quicker than I think we would have expected. I believe this is his first or second year with St. John's, and inheriting a mess. Basically, they tried the Mullen experiment. That didn't really work out too well. And so, honestly, if I'm Seton Hall, I'm afraid right now because you're now entering a game against a team that's desperate for a win to get into March Madness, who has a resume that is worthy of getting in March Madness. Make no mistake about it, St. John's is a March Madness quality team. Whether they get in or not, they need to win this game. You can consider the Seton Hall-St. John's game. The loser is definitely done. So this is the epitome of a March Madness bubble game.
Yeah, Mike Anderson, who was at Arkansas, he was at Missouri, and lands at St. John's, like you mentioned, after Chris Mullen really didn't work out. They start 0-3 in the Big East, and actually they were 1-5 out of the gate, and then went on a nice run. They were covering a lot of games, and now they beat Providence a few nights ago. They get Seton Hall again, and you mentioned Seton Hall about the non-conference. Louisville, Rhode Island, and Oregon lost all three of those, and if you're Seton Hall, those are good opponents, but you got to beat some of them. So
the Rhode Island game is the big one because Rhode Island finished the season this year at a 10-14 record. That's much like Marquette this year. Their record is worse than what they actually do on the court. They're very competitive. They're more competitive than what their record might tell you. But that was a game they needed to win in hindsight, looking back at it now. If Seton Hall misses the tournament, you can circle that Rhode Island game as one of the reasons they're out.
Tom Cunningham, you could check out the bracketology at vegasinsider.com, and you can be sure he'll update it tomorrow and the next day, and the next day, and the next day with all these conference tournaments. Is there one small tournament that you're looking forward to? I mean, I know we could talk about the big ones, but is there a small one that you're looking forward to at least getting towards the semifinals or finals?
Yeah, well, I know the OVC, I believe that's tonight. It's Belmont and Jacksonville State. I know a lot of people might not know much about Jacksonville State, but they can win this game, and it will be interesting to see if they do win. What does the committee do with Belmont? Because we have seen the committee give Belmont an at-large bid before, which I at the time thought was crazy, but they ended up winning the play-in game, and they proved me wrong. So it will be interesting to see. I'm very much looking forward to seeing if Belmont, because you actually brought this up to me a few days ago, they've lost more games recently than they've won. I think they've lost 2 of 3 or 3 of 4, something like that, after winning, 30 games in a row this year. So it's going to be very interesting to see if Jacksonville State can get through and get a ticket punched tonight. And then, of course, you have the MVC, which is Drake and Loyola Chicago's conference. If those two end up getting to the championship, that's going to be very interesting as well, because Drake right now, they're on the bubble. They're 24-3. They're not as much of a lock as they were maybe a week or two ago. If Drake does not make the WVC championship game, they might not get into the tournament. So that's going to be one to watch as well.
Yeah, Drake just lost to Bradley a few days ago, and they had a couple bumps in the road after they had that incredible start, not only straight up, but against the spread. They were covering every single spread. But, we'll see what Drake does. And, if they face off with Loyola Chicago in the MVC championship potentially. So all of that is possible. Tom Cunningham, we appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week as we get into the big conference tournaments.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin.
All right, you got it. There's Tom Cunningham right there. And let's take a look now, since we've talked so much college basketball, to look at the NBA. We are at the All-Star break in the NBA, so obviously no preview for tonight. But let's look back at last night quickly, since we hit on all the college basketball. And the Toronto Raptors, we'll start with them. They lose at Boston 132-125. The Raptors get the cover as 8-point underdogs, and they had a bunch of guys missing. Fred VanVleet was out. Also, Pascal Siakam was out. And the Raptors had lost to the Celtics twice this season. Now they've lost to them 3 times, but the first 2 times they didn't cover. So the Raptors get the cover as 8-point dogs on Thursday night. 132-125 was the defeat for the Toronto Raptors, and Boston closes out their homestand a perfect 4-0. So you got to give them that. The Celtics had some downs there towards the end, and they actually bounced back and play well going into the break. The Wizards beat the Clippers 119-117 in D.C., so Washington finishes on a high note. Clippers 8.5-point favorites, no Paul George last night, and the Clippers up by 7 at the half. They can't hold it. So for Washington, got to give them some credit after their terrible start to the season as they go 5, 6, 7, 8, and 3, the final 11. They lose this game by 1 to Boston, and they had a couple clunkers against the Clippers at Staples Center and Memphis at home. So Washington, very competitive, beating the Lakers in overtime, holding off the Nuggets, beating actually Denver twice by 2 points each. But Washington actually played well towards the end of the first half. So did Denver. And the Nuggets got to be kicking themselves for losing to Washington twice. But Denver, they've won 4 straight. Look at that road trip. 4-0, and then they get one with Memphis after the All-Star break. But 4-0 straight up and against the spread. They beat Indiana last night, 113-103. So the Nuggets, really nice job by them. The Pacers, not playing well at the moment. 1-5 the last 5, or 1-5 the last 6, 0-6 against the spread the last 6 games for the Pacers. And look at that. Lakers, Suns, Nuggets, Nets, Heat, Bucks. Oh, my God. That is a rough stretch for Indiana coming up after the All-Star break. So they really hurt themselves by losing to the Knicks. I mean, the Boston game was kind of back and forth a little bit. And they should have lost to Cleveland. So Indiana not playing well right now. And maybe the All-Star break is the best thing for them. Milwaukee wins at Memphis, 112-111. Milwaukee was up 18 in this game. Memphis came back, took the lead, and then the Bucks end up winning. They don't cover 6.5-point favorites, and the Bucks, they end up closing the first half on a 6-1 run. They had this bad one against Denver, but the Bucks, though, really bounced back after this 5-game skid, which is now in the rearview mirror. However, the Bucks really not good against the spread on the road of late. 0-4 against the spread their last 4 away from Fiserv Forum. And Milwaukee will get the Knicks, then the Wizards twice in Philly coming up after the All-Star break. Oklahoma City has now beaten San Antonio twice in the past week. 107-102, or I guess a little over a week. 107-102 in San Antonio, 7-point dogs. They bounced back from scoring 78 at Dallas the night before. And Oklahoma City, look, they're not going to be a factor in the West. They're not a playoff team, but they've been competitive. San Antonio, meanwhile, they got to be kicking themselves for this loss. They blow out the Knicks a few nights ago. They lose the night before to the Nets in overtime. They forced overtime. They lost on this 3-pointer at the buzzer. It's Oklahoma City. San Antonio's still been a very good team in spite of injuries, but this is one Pop is going to look back. You can't lose that one, Oklahoma City. Can't do that. Up 11 at the half. The Heat, in a game where a couple big guys didn't play, Bam Adebayo for the Heat and Zion Williamson didn't play for New Orleans. But the Heat win by 10. They were up 16 after 1, pretty much in control of this game most of the way. And they were laying 2 on the road. And look at Miami, after blowing this Golden State game, what they did. 7-1. Didn't play well against Atlanta here in that second end of that 2-game set with the Hawks. 7-1, the final 8, beating the Lakers, beating the Raptors, beating the Jazz, winning at New Orleans. You know, that's a good job by the Heat. And they come out of the gate here, really favorable schedule. Magic at home, at the Bulls, at the Magic, Cleveland, at Memphis, Indiana, who struggled, and then it gets a little hairy here with Phoenix and Portland. But that stretch there for the Heat is not crazy for them to separate themselves from the rest of the Southeast Division. And New Orleans with that loss, you know, I say that you got to take them as a home dog, but when Zion's not playing, it's a whole different team. Sacramento loses at Portland, but the Kings get a rare cover as they fall 123-119 to the Blazers. They're now 0-3 against Portland this season, but they finally cover against Portland, and 2 of the 3 now have gone over the total. But they can't capitalize off the Laker win. No LeBron, no AD. And Sacramento, 2 covers since February 9th. So that's a pretty awful job by the Kings down the stretch. And for Portland, they were off that Golden State win the night before, and they needed to, in a sense, rally past the Kings. Portland ends up, look at all of this inconsistency. 6 straight wins, 4 straight losses, 3 straight wins. So the Blazers pick up the 3 wins they needed to give them a little bit of life now. Phoenix at home, revenge spot for the 32-point loss. And then you got a lot of back-to-backs. Minnesota, New Orleans, Dallas. So we'll see what the Blazers do. Steph Curry doesn't play for Golden State last night. They got trucked by Phoenix 120-98. So not a good ending for the Warriors. 0-3 straight up and against the spread, the final three. Blew the Blazer game, blown out by the Lakers. So 2 bad losses there. And Golden State, look at this coming up. Clippers, Jazz, Lakers right out of the chute for Steve Kerr's team. The Suns, with that big win, they continue to play well. Knicks beat the Pistons 114-104. And the Knicks, with that win, they closed the first half strong. They beat Detroit twice. And again, I feel like I keep saying this about the Knicks. They didn't beat a lot of great teams in the last few weeks, but wins are wins. And that's what the Knicks need right now, and they're a playoff team. They are a playoff team right now in the Eastern Conference. And Detroit, the news today that Blake Griffin got bought out, so he'll be going elsewhere probably after the All-Star break. And Detroit, they've now gone 0-3 straight, and they end up losing this game to the Knicks. We know they're not a good team, so there's really no surprise there. Quickly, let's look at the NHL. And last night in the NHL, you had a lot of games. Philly comes back from a 3-0 deficit to beat Pittsburgh. That's a terrible loss for the Penguins, 4-3. Tampa Bay scored 2 in the third and scored with a tenth of a second to go in overtime to beat Chicago 3-2. So no puck line win for the Lightning, but that's a terrible loss if you're the Blackhawks. Winnipeg jumped out to a 2-0 lead on Montreal. They win in overtime 4-3. Carolina pulled away from Detroit. They get the puck line win 5-2. The Panthers were up big on the Predators, but they leave with a 5-4 victory. Columbus over Dallas. Dallas has been terrible. That's a team to stay away from right now. 3-2 win for the Blue Jackets. How about Vancouver? They beat Toronto. They slowed down the Maple Leafs, who've been playing really well, 3-1. Calgary blows out Ottawa 7-3, and the Islanders beat the Sabres, who have been pretty much a disaster the whole season. And the Friday night NHL, Bruins and Capitals, big game inside the East, or inside the, shouldn't call it, well, it is the East, yeah. I mean, it's not the Eastern Conference, it's the East Division, with all the changes this year. Tampa Bay and Chicago play again at United Center, LA and St. Louis from Staples, and Vegas a huge favorite at San Jose. Colorado laying a bunch to Anaheim, but Anaheim hasn't been good. Let's take a quick look at auto for this weekend, the Pennzoil 400 at Las Vegas Motor Speedway in Vegas. And you see the favorites here. None of them have won a race yet this year. Granted, it's been only 3 races, but Martin Truex Jr., 6-1. Harvick, Keselowski, Logano, 13-2. Denny Hamlin, 9-1. And the winners we've seen so far, Alex Bowman won at Homestead last week, 25-1. Christopher Bell, who won at the road course at Daytona, he's 35-1. And Michael McDowell won 25-1. So those are the... Or did I say Alex Bowman? William Byron. I'm sorry. I said Alex Bowman. William Byron won last week, not Bowman. I always get those two guys confused. William Byron. He is 25-1, also with Alex Bowman for the checkered flag this week in Vegas. And again, are you looking at someone here in this range? Eric Almirola, Austin Dillon, Tyler Reddick, who had a close finish last week, DiBenedetto, Bowman, even a Kurt Busch. Are you looking at these guys, or is it going to be one of these guys finally going to break? Blaney has not been good. Ryan Blaney's got to pick it up a little bit. Chase Elliott's got to pick it up a little bit. Logano's had some bad luck, and then he didn't have a good finish at Homestead last week. So you have a lot of these guys that it's been an interesting start, to say the least, for this NASCAR season. So that is the look at NASCAR. For the championship, see, you still have these guys at the top. No one's won a race yet, but these are still the favorites. Chase Elliott, number 1, and Hamlin, Harvick. So that is the look at NASCAR for the weekend. And we have hockey picks as well for tonight for a couple of the games out west. And you can also check out the UFC picks as well. You'll see that on our homepage. Saturday, the Kentucky Derby prep best bets. Soccer, our man Anthony Stabile, his rankings, more UFC analysis for 259. So you have all of that, a very busy weekend, even in spite of no NBA, and the All-Star game is Sunday. in Atlanta, if you are interested in watching that. And the NBA returns next Wednesday. So that is the look at the Daily Insider for Friday, March 5th. Our thanks to Tom Cunningham for joining us to talk brackets. And we will talk to you again on Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern here on the Vegas Insider channel on YouTube. So we appreciate it. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks so much for watching. And we will talk to you again on Monday right here on VegasInsider.com.